horrible. There are so many hard parts. The hardest for me is the kids. That's the hardest for me.
Kelly Clarkson spent years building a career that looked almost impossible from the outside. She went from a small Texas town, uncertain beginnings, and rejection after rejection to becoming a Grammy-winning superstar with one of the most recognizable voices in popular music. Yet behind that success was a personal story that became increasingly complicated. Her marriage to Brandon Blackstock began as a relationship that seemed to offer stability, family, and a partner who understood the entertainment business. Eventually, however, the marriage ended in a painful divorce, followed by disputes over money, career management, property, and trust. Now, the story is remembered not simply as the breakup of a famous couple, but as a chapter in Kelly's life when she had to decide what she was willing to protect, what she was willing to let go, and who she wanted to become afterward. Kelly's journey began far away from Hollywood. She grew up in Burleson, Texas, in a family marked by separation. Her father left when she was 6, and her siblings ended up living in different households. Her mother, a schoolteacher, raised her in a modest environment where money was limited and life demanded resilience. Kelly grew up attending church regularly and surrounded by a conservative Southern Baptist culture that emphasized structure, responsibility, and respect. Music became an escape and, eventually, a direction. While Kelly was attending Pauline Hughes Middle School, a choir teacher named Cynthia Glenn heard her singing and encouraged her to audition for the school choir. Kelly had never taken formal voice lessons and was not completely convinced that singing could become her future. Still, she said yes. That small decision became one of the earliest turning points in her story. After graduating high school in 2000, Kelly received scholarship offers from respected music institutions, including the University of Texas at Austin, the University of North Texas, and Berklee College of Music. Instead of going to college, she decided to pursue practical experience and find a way into the music industry. She worked whatever jobs she could find. She telemarketed, waited tables at a comedy club, and handed out Red Bull samples at events. The goal was simple: earn enough money to pay for studio time and create a demo. The demo, however, did not produce the breakthrough she wanted. Record companies rejected her, with industry opinions suggesting that her sound was too soulful, too emotional, or difficult to market. In 2001, Kelly moved to Los Angeles, hoping the larger entertainment market would finally give her a chance. Instead, another setback arrived. She was rejected by major labels, and then her apartment caught fire, leaving her without a home. With her plans collapsing around her, she returned to Burleson. Then came 2002. A friend dared Kelly to audition for a new television competition called American Idol. The show was still an unknown experiment, and the contestants had to navigate an unusually chaotic production process. Yet the moment Kelly began singing, the uncertainty disappeared. Her voice was impossible to ignore. On September 4, 2002, Kelly Clarkson won the first season of American Idol with 58% of the vote. She was only 20 years old. Her debut single, featuring Before Your Love and A Moment Like This, made history by jumping from number 52 to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The leap surpassed a record previously held by the Beatles. Suddenly, the woman who had been rejected by record executives was a national star. But fame was only the beginning. Kelly's professional life grew quickly, and so did the complexity of the relationships surrounding it. One of those relationships would eventually become central to a much more painful chapter. Kelly met Brandon Blackstock in 2006 while preparing for the Academy of Country Music Awards. Brandon was connected to the country music world, and his stepmother was country superstar Reba McEntire, someone Kelly already admired. Nothing romantic happened at that time. Their paths crossed again years later, and the relationship developed quickly. By December 2012, Kelly and Brandon were engaged. They married in October 2013. From the outside, the pairing seemed natural. Kelly was an established recording artist, while Brandon understood the entertainment business. They appeared to share an interest in music, family, and a quieter life away from the constant pressure of celebrity. Their family grew. Brandon had 2 children from a previous marriage, and Kelly and Brandon welcomed River Rose in 2014 and Remington Alexander in 2016. Public images showed vacations, family moments, backstage affection, and the kind of happiness fans often associate with a successful celebrity marriage. But private life can look very different from public photographs. Kelly later described feeling emotionally alone and, at times, like a single mother despite being married. She was balancing motherhood, a major recording career, television work, and the demands of public life. Over time, the emotional strain became harder to ignore. In June 2020, Kelly filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. What followed was not a simple separation. The divorce became entangled with custody, property, support, and a separate dispute involving the management of Kelly's professional career. Brandon had been involved in managing Kelly through his father's company, Starstruck Management Group. According to the legal dispute described in the source material, California authorities later found that Brandon and the company had acted as talent agents without the required license in connection with certain deals. The dispute became a major legal battle. In November 2023, a California labor commissioner awarded Kelly more than $2.6 million in damages. The ruling concerned commissions connected to professional deals, including work associated with The Voice. Brandon appealed the decision. The legal fight eventually moved toward a confidential settlement in May 2024, several months before a scheduled trial. The exact terms were sealed, but the case had already changed the public understanding of the marriage. For Kelly, however, the legal dispute was only one part of the story. The deeper issue was trust. She had built her career around her voice, her work ethic, and her ability to connect with audiences. The person she married had also become involved in the business surrounding that career. When the relationship collapsed, the professional and personal worlds collided. The result was a painful question. How do you rebuild when the person you trusted most was also connected to the machinery surrounding your success? The answer would take years. The divorce also involved Kelly's Montana ranch. The property had once represented family life and a private retreat. During the separation, however, it became another point of conflict. Brandon remained at the property, and the dispute continued until he was eventually ordered to leave in June 2022. By then, Kelly was dealing with far more than legal paperwork. She was trying to create stability for her children while rebuilding her own sense of identity. That process became visible in the choices she made next. The years before the divorce also showed how complicated Kelly's professional rise had become. Success brought opportunities, but it also brought contracts, negotiations, management decisions, touring demands, television commitments, and an enormous financial machine operating behind the music. To the audience, a finished performance looked effortless. Behind it were teams of lawyers, managers, agents, producers, executives, and advisors. That is why the later management dispute mattered so much. It was not merely an argument over a paycheck. It touched the boundary between personal trust and professional responsibility. When a spouse is also involved in a career, separating the two worlds can become extremely difficult. Decisions made at work can affect the marriage, while disagreements at home can change the way business decisions are understood. Kelly had spent years trusting the people around her because building a career at her level requires trust. She could not personally handle every contract, appearance, negotiation, and business decision. Her success depended on delegating responsibilities. The divorce forced her to examine those relationships more closely. For fans, this was one reason the story felt bigger than a typical celebrity breakup. Kelly was not only dividing a household. She was untangling a network of responsibilities that had developed over many years. At the center of it all were her children. Whatever happened between the adults, Kelly still had to wake up, work, parent, and create a sense of normal life. That responsibility made the situation more complicated than any headline could explain. And while the public waited for dramatic statements, Kelly largely kept working. That restraint was important. Silence did not necessarily mean she had nothing to say. It meant she was choosing when, where, and how to speak. Eventually, the music began saying some of it for her. Chemistry would later become one of the clearest examples of that transition. Instead of hiding behind a polished pop narrative, Kelly allowed complicated feelings to exist side by side. Love could be remembered while anger remained. Memories could be painful without erasing the good moments. Healing could begin without pretending the damage never happened. That honesty shaped her next chapter. In February 2022, Kelly legally changed her name to Kelly Brianne, while continuing to use Clarkson professionally. The decision carried personal meaning because the Clarkson name was connected to the father who had left her family when she was a child. She had already explored that complicated history through her music, especially in Piece by Piece, a song built around the contrast between the father who abandoned her and the father she hoped her children would experience. After the divorce, that contrast became painfully complicated. A song about breaking a family pattern suddenly sounded different when Kelly's own marriage had ended. Yet music remained one of the ways she processed what had happened. In June 2023, she released Chemistry, her 10th studio album. Rather than presenting a neat story of heartbreak followed by instant recovery, the album explored conflicting emotions: grief, anger, regret, attraction, disappointment, and the possibility of healing. Songs such as Mine and Red Flag Collector connected with listeners because they felt direct and emotionally exposed. Kelly also allowed humor to become part of her recovery. In a promotional image connected to her holiday album, 4 stockings appeared by the fireplace. One for Kelly, one for each child, and a 4th labeled Nope. The joke was simple, but fans understood the message. She could acknowledge the difficult past without allowing it to control every part of her present. At the same time, Kelly spoke more openly about therapy, anxiety, and the pressure of balancing public expectations with motherhood. Her children became a major source of motivation. Instead of pretending that everything was fine, she increasingly emphasized the importance of showing up, processing pain, and continuing forward. That shift was especially important because Kelly had spent much of her life being perceived as the strong one. She was the woman with the huge voice, the quick sense of humor, and the ability to make audiences feel comfortable. But strength did not mean she had never been overwhelmed. It meant learning how to keep moving without hiding the fact that something had hurt. By 2025, the rebuilding process had also reached Kelly's professional life. After leaving Atlantic Records, she moved toward greater independence in her music. In May 2025, she released the indie single Where Have You Been, described in the source material as a song she wrote and produced herself. The move represented more than another release. It reflected a larger desire for control over her creative direction. She also returned to live performance with the Las Vegas residency Kelly Clarkson studio sessions. The residency was designed as a more intimate, stripped-back experience, giving her an opportunity to focus on the music and the connection with her audience. Meanwhile, the Kelly Clarkson Show continued to attract viewers because of the same qualities that had made Kelly successful as a singer: honesty, humor, warmth, and an ability to make people feel seen. Her career had survived the collapse of her marriage. But the most important part of her new life was not another award, another record, or another television success. It was her children. River Rose and Remington Alexander became the center of Kelly's priorities. After years of public scrutiny and a difficult separation, she wanted their lives to feel stable. That influenced how she thought about dating and relationships. In 2025, Kelly said she was not actively dating but remained open to what she described as a rare, almost magical, unicorn moment. Even then, her children's feelings mattered. She had no interest in forcing a new relationship into a family structure that was still healing. The message was clear: she was no longer searching for someone to complete her life. She was building a life that already had meaning. That did not mean Kelly had closed the door on love forever. It meant she was moving carefully. After a relationship that had intertwined romance, family, career, and legal conflict, there was little reason to rush. Her focus became stability, honesty, and being present for her children. There was another side of Kelly's life that often received less attention: giving back. Long before the divorce, she had participated in charitable efforts involving organizations such as Idol Gives Back, UNICEF, Feeding America, and Stomp Out Bullying. She also supported the March of Dimes and its efforts involving neonatal care and maternal health. One especially personal commitment involved House of Hope, a non-profit supporting orphaned and HIV-affected children in South Africa. Kelly traveled there, met children, listened to their experiences, and later performed a song written in their honor. Her compassion also extended to animals. At her Texas ranch, Kelly reportedly cared for more than 80 animals, including blind dogs, amputee goats, and horses recovering from serious medical problems. These were not simply glamorous additions to a celebrity property. Many were vulnerable animals that needed patience, treatment, and long-term care. In that sense, Kelly's story after divorce is not only about escaping a painful marriage. It is about deciding what kind of life comes next. She had already survived rejection as a teenager. She survived the disappointment of a failed demo. She survived being rejected by record labels. She survived an apartment fire that left her homeless. Then she survived the pressure of sudden fame. Later, she faced the collapse of a marriage, complicated legal disputes, financial questions, custody battles, and the painful task of separating her personal identity from a relationship that had once defined so much of her adult life. Through it all, music remained the constant. Kelly did not become successful because her life was easy. Her story has always been built around setbacks followed by another attempt. That pattern began when a choir teacher encouraged a young girl to trust a voice she barely understood. It continued when she left Texas for Los Angeles, returned home after losing everything, and then stepped onto the American Idol stage. Years later, the same instinct appeared again. When her marriage ended, Kelly did not disappear. She changed the way she worked. She changed the way she understood herself. She made music about the experience. She raised her children. She continued performing. She expanded her charitable work. Most importantly, she began defining her future without relying on the relationship that had once occupied so much of her life. There is a temptation with celebrity divorce stories to search for one villain and one victim, one shocking secret and one perfect ending. Real life is rarely that simple. Kelly's experience involved love, family, business, disappointment, legal conflict, and recovery. The public saw headlines, court decisions, television appearances, and songs. Kelly had to live every ordinary day in between those headlines. That may be why her story resonates so strongly. She was not simply rebuilding a career. She was rebuilding a sense of home. Today, the most powerful part of Kelly Clarkson's story may not be the moment she won American Idol or the records that followed. It may be the quieter decision to keep becoming herself after a chapter of her life ended. The girl from Burleson who once worked odd jobs to afford a demo could never have known where that voice would take her. She could not have predicted the arenas, the awards, the television show, the marriage, the children, the divorce, or the legal battles. But she kept singing. And after everything changed, she kept singing again. That is the thread connecting every chapter. Rejection did not silence her, failure did not silence her, heartbreak did not silence her, and even a painful public battle did not take away the voice that built her life. Kelly Clarkson's story is ultimately a story of reinvention. It is about discovering that starting over does not mean returning to the beginning. Sometimes it means taking everything you survived, everything you learned, and everything you still love, and using it to build something stronger. For Kelly, that future appears to be centered on music, motherhood, independence, and purpose. And perhaps that is the real ending to this chapter. Not revenge. Not another headline. Not the perfect Hollywood comeback. Just a woman who finally has the freedom to decide what comes next. Kelly's story also connects again to the person she was before fame. The child who experienced abandonment learned early that life could change without warning. The young singer who lost her apartment learned that plans could collapse overnight. The artist who faced rejection learned that being told no was not the same as being finished. Those lessons did not make later pain easier, but they help explain her rebuilding. Kelly had practiced starting again before the world knew her name. And this time, she was not starting alone. She had her children, her music, her audience, and knowledge that she could survive uncertainty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into the lives, careers, and untold chapters of the stars you thought you knew.